morning, one and all. Y'all made me put on a suit on a Saturday morning. I'll forgive you for that. But let me say how delighted I am to be back in Edgecombe County one more time. And to be introduced by Jacqueline Marie Dickens, a 16-year-old high school student with extraordinary ability, with great ambition, who's going to go a long way in her career. I'm delighted that she was given the opportunity to introduce me this morning. Thank you so very much. You know, the world is real small, and you know, the older you get, the more you realize that Olga, this young lady's mother's from Enfield. Anybody know where Enfield is?
Oh, yeah.
But the Thornton family, her maiden name is Thornton. The Thornton family and my family that lived in Enfield were just like that. And my aunt and uncle who lived in Enfield, and my uncle pastored up there for 64 years. 4 churches, if that makes any sense. 4 churches, first Sunday, second Sunday, third Sunday, fourth Sunday. But one church, he was there for 64 years, but they didn't have any children. And I was their only surrogate child, but I didn't live there. And the Thornton family was the family that reached out and supported my uncle and my aunt in their later years. And so every time I see Olga, I think about the Thornton family in Enfield. But enough about that. Let's talk about Democrats this morning. Where do I start? There's so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for passing out this map, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. I could talk about it all day long, and I had planned to talk about it, but you passed out the picture and wrote it up. This is so very helpful. Every 10 years, each state in the country is given an allotment of representatives. It's based on the population. North Carolina now has almost 10 million people, and so based on our population, we are entitled to 13 seats in the House of Representatives. 10 years ago, we were entitled to 12 seats, but because North Carolina grew at a rapid pace, more rapid than some of the other states in the country, we now have 13 representatives. And the North Carolina legislature is tasked with the responsibility every 10 years to go into session and to carve the state into 13 districts. And so back in 2011, the Republican legislature, after they had taken over Raleigh, went into session and carved up the state in unimaginable ways. Yeah. Even though there are more Democrats in North Carolina than Republicans, they drew the map in such a way that it maximized Republican influence in the congressional delegation as well as the legislative delegations. Well, every political party has done that over the years. We did it when we were in power, but the Republican Party was almost non-existent in North Carolina, and so the Democratic Party was the predominant party with 90% of the state. And so Democrats drew the lines in favor of Democrats. But now, as the years have gone on, we are a two-party state. There are more Democrats in North Carolina than Republicans. And so when the legislature drew the maps, they drew the maps in such a way that Republican districts would result. Now you say, well, how do you do that? People don't know how people want to vote. Yes, they do. Computers now are so sophisticated that the map drawers can predict with almost certainty how an individual is going to vote and how other people in their household will vote. And so when they drew this map, they drew it in such a way that would maximize their influence. And it was challenged. It was challenged because the first thing the Republican legislators did was to find every African-American community they could find across North Carolina, because African-Americans, as all of us know, are overwhelmingly Democratic and vote Democratic greater than 90% in every election. And so their challenge was to find every African-American community and to pack those communities into 3 districts. District 12, District 4, and District 1, my district. They took all of these African-American communities all across North Carolina, wherever they were. If they were up in Elizabeth City, They would go into Elizabeth City and just carve out the African-American community, leave the white communities alone, carve out the African-American communities and pack those communities into my district. The purpose of all of that was to take away black votes from other districts and put them into districts that they knew that were Democrat under any circumstance. And so it worked. And so as a result of the map, we now have 3 Democrats only serving in the House of Representatives and 10 Republicans in a state that has more Democrat than Republican voters. And so I'm glad you passed this map out because it makes a lot of sense. We challenged the map because I had 24 counties, and it is hard to manage 24 counties. Hard to manage 24 counties. And so the map was challenged in court, and the court found unanimously that the Republicans acted unconstitutionally in taking all of these black communities and just packing those into 3 districts. And the court ordered that they be unpacked. And so the legislature unpacked the district. That's why I now have 14 counties instead of 24 counties. But an issue is still hanging out there called political redistricting. We've solved the racial gerrymandering because these districts have now been unpacked. But what's still hanging out there is whether or not the legislature went too far politically in drawing these lines. Politically, because they can look at, their computer can look right in the terminal and almost tell how people in each household is going to vote. So when they draw the lines, they can draw the lines accordingly. And so that's something you need to watch. As time goes on, the question of political redistricting will be examined. And so thank you, Edgecombe County, for your friendship. You've been with me for a long time, and I've been with you for a long time. Before going to Congress, I was a Superior Court judge, and I was the resident judge, whether you remember it or not, I know some of you do, for Edgecombe and Wilson counties. Frank Brown and myself were the 2 resident judges for this judicial district. And even though we were elected from Edgecombe and Wilson counties, we held court all over eastern North Carolina. And so I spent a lot of good years in the Edgecombe County Courthouse, trying some cases that I shall never, ever forget. So thank you for your friendship. Thank you for letting me go to Washington. It's a labor of love. There's a lot going on in Washington. I'm going to talk about that until my time runs out. I set my stopwatch when I started, so I'm right on top of the time. But there's a whole lot going on in Washington that you may or may not know. And so I want to break it down to you as much as I can. But thank you to the Edgecombe County Democrats for sticking together. Thank you for being a political force in eastern North Carolina. Edgecombe and Halifax counties are heavily Democratic counties, and when they do the calculus in Raleigh and in Washington about which way North Carolina is going to go in the election, there are certain counties that they look at as a benchmark, and Edgecombe County is a benchmark because this Democratic Party is alive and well, and you turn out to vote in large numbers in every election. Thank you very much for that. And thank you to your outgoing chairman, Reverend Roosevelt Higgs. Now, everybody in this room knows Roosevelt Higgs. Everybody in this room knows Roosevelt Higgs. I know Roosevelt, as long as most of you in this room have known it. Every county needs a Roosevelt Higgs. Let me tell you about this brother, then I'm going to go ahead and get on my speech here. He called me 3 times this morning. Okay, I was awake. But then he called my staff to tell them what he had told me. Okay? And so we've been in great communication this morning, but that just is an example of the type of commitment that Roosevelt has shown to this party in this county. This man loves Edgecombe County. There's no one who can ever dispute the sincerity of Reverend Roosevelt Higgs in this work. So thank you, Roosevelt. I don't know where you went. Thank you, Roosevelt, for all that you did. And I remember I was campaigning for some office, Roosevelt. I don't know whether it was for me or somebody else, but you took me to some churches around Edgecombe County, and I thought I was a church expert. But he got me in the back door of some churches. I must have gone to about 8 churches that Sunday, and not prearranged. I mean, he just pulled up to the church and just said, "Out here, Congressman, He went in there, came back to the door and said, come on in. And next thing I know, Reverend Hines, I'm in the pulpit. Apologizing, first of all, for interrupting the service, but secondly, for thanking them for that friendship. So that's the Roosevelt Higgs that I know. Our nation is at a crossroads right now. You know, our nation is at a crossroads. Ever since Richard Nixon, our nation has been bending right, but we've always had a counterbalance to the right-wing ideology. We've always had a Democratic president, and we've always had progressive states and progressive congressmen and senators who kind of pulled it back as it tried to go right. They were pulling it back in the other direction. The Ted Kennedys of the world and others, they were pulling it back. And so there was always this left-right struggle in Washington. But as of November last year, starting on January 20th of this year, when the new president took the oath of office, this nation no longer is veering right, it has turned right. And you need to realize that, and you need to pay attention because it is a big day. It's a sad day for America. For the next 4 years, this nation is going to be under the executive leadership of Donald J. Trump, who understands nothing at all about government. He doesn't understand how this thing works. You don't operate this country like a business. You can use some business principles, but you can't operate just like a church. You cannot operate the government like a business. And so now you have this man who is now the president, and he's there for the next 4 years. President Obama, we miss him so very much. Oh, do we miss Barack Obama? We miss his intelligence. We miss his steady hand. We miss his ability to talk to different people and different cultures and to try to work things out. President Obama was there for 8 long years. And don't anyone tell you that those 8 years brought America down. Those 8 years have brought America back. When President Obama became president in January of 2009, this nation was this close to a depression. Not a recession, we were already in a recession. We were losing jobs at 700,000 jobs per month. The automotive industry was about to go under. Financial institutions going under. Foreclosures at an all-time high. Consumer confidence was at an all-time low. We were in the worst economic condition that we had been in since 1929. And this is what Barack Obama inherited on the first day of his administration. I'm not talking about the first month, the first day. This man walks into the Oval Office and sits down at his desk. The smart people in the world came in, the economic advisors they're called, and sat around and told him, President Obama, we're about to go into a depression. He said, well, I know things are bad, but you don't mean a depression. You know, words really matter. Let's call it what it is. And they said, Mr. President, we're calling it what it is. We're about to go into a depression. And we've got to do something, we have to do it quickly. What do you recommend, the President said? They said, we recommend a stimulus bill. We've got to put money immediately into the economy. We've got to get people working, and we've got to jumpstart this economy. President Obama said, well, George Bush spent all the money. We don't have money. We don't have money to put into the economy without borrowing it. They said, well, if you must borrow it, we got to borrow it. We got to do it. We got to do it now. We can't wait 2, 3, 4 months to do it. It must be done now. President Obama brings us $1 trillion stimulus package. Republicans said, no way over our dead body will we ever vote to increase the deficit, even if it means keeping us from going into a depression. They said, well, that makes no sense at all. That makes no sense that you're not willing to add to the debt in order to keep the country going. They said, well, that's what we mean. And so we went back and forth for a while. But finally we agreed on $787 billion as the price tag for a stimulus package. It wasn't enough. The economists told us it wasn't enough. 1/3 of the stimulus consisted of tax cuts for middle class and rich people. Obama had to make that concession in order to get it passed. 1/3 of it was tax cuts. But we took the stimulus bill and we invested it in the economy, and we started with a robust plan to build infrastructure and do things, and finally the economy began to recoil and rebound. Unemployment was up at 10%. Today it's 4.5%. Okay? Look at the stock market. Every day when you watch the news, they usually end the news with the stock market, the Dow Jones and the S&P and all that kind of stuff. Look at it. It's where it's never been before. It's over 20,000 points. And for those of you who have 401ks and retirements, that is a big deal. Yeah. So don't let anyone tell you that the nation is worse now than it has been before. And Democrats have been responsible for that. We believe in economic growth. Yes, we do. I don't want the word to go out that Democrats don't believe in economic growth, because we do believe in growing the economy. Yes, we do. But we don't believe in growing the economy at the expense of middle-class families and working families and low-income folks. We cannot do that. But the Republicans look at the world so differently. They look at it so differently than we as Democrats. And let me tell you what's happening now in Washington. And I'm telling you stuff that you already know, but I'm just saying it for emphasis. We lost control. Democrats were in charge from 2006 to 2010. Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker. Harry Reid was the head of the Senate. Barack Obama was the President of the United States, and we were in control of the federal government. And that was good. But anytime you are in control, then that carries with it certain responsibilities and risk. So after we got the stimulus bill out of the way, the first thing Obama said to us was that we need a health care plan that will guarantee access to health care for every American. I promised it in my campaign. Every other president has tried his hand at doing something about health care, and all of them have failed. And I'm going to put my toe in the water, and I'm going to test it, and I'm going to see if we can find a way to get health care for every American. And he did that. He worked that. And I'm on the committee that wrote the bill. The smart people at the White House worked with the smart people who worked for our committee, our staffs. They all got together. The next thing we do, we had a 2,700-page bill that we had put together. Marvelous piece of legislation. The Affordable Care Act, it is called. And now they call it Obamacare. The Affordable Care Act did several things. First of all, it said that we're going to do some general things like pre-existing illnesses. Insurance companies can't penalize you for having a pre-existing illness. If you are an older person, they cannot charge any more than 3 times what they would charge a younger person for health insurance. Not 10 times or 20 times, but a factor of 1 to 3 was the ratio. That was put in. Students, children, kids up to age 26 can stay on their parents' plan. These are some basic things that we wrote into the law. But then we went deeper. We said, okay, if you live in America, if you are a taxpaying citizen, you've got to have health insurance. Because the more people who are in the insurance pool, the more money is in the pool, and the more likely we are to be able to help folks in times of need. So if you're an American citizen, you've got to have health insurance. And if you don't, you're going to pay a penalty. That's the way it is. And so we took it a step further. We said, all right, now we're going to create an insurance marketplace so that middle income families who work every day and don't have any money left over, we can fix it so they can afford health insurance. And so we're going to give these families, and it was a formula, up to a certain percentage of poverty, 138% of poverty. But if you're a middle class family, let's say making $40,000 a year with a family of 4, you cannot afford health insurance, and we will give you X number of dollars to purchase your insurance. And so if your policy is $600 a month, we might give you $400 a month toward the $600 in purchasing insurance. That's called a subsidy. And the subsidy is now operational. So when people go out and buy insurance now, the government subsidizes the premiums that are paid each month. Republicans didn't like that. They didn't like it at all. They said, well, it's going to cost money. Sure, it's going to cost money. So what we did, we added we increased the percentage of tax that's paid on medical devices. You know, the medical device industry is now a pretty big deal. You know, and medical devices, we increased 2 or 3 pennies on every machine that's sold in the medical device market. And we also raised taxes on people having a just gross incomes of $1 million or more per year. We increased their tax rate from 35 to 39.6%. And that's how we paid for the Affordable Care Act. But then we did one further thing, which is very dear to me and very dear to you because you live in a low-income community. We expanded Medicaid. We said that it's a tragedy that Medicaid only applies to families, poor families with dependent children and families with disabled children and adults, but does not apply to a low-income single individual who doesn't have children. Just think about your nephew, your grandson, your granddaughter, you know, who's 32 years old, no children, no health insurance because he or she cannot afford it. Medicaid doesn't apply to them because they don't have dependent children and they're not disabled. And so what we did was to expand the Medicaid program to include these new people who don't have children, which is a whole lot of folk across America. And we told the states, look guys, you got some poor folks in your state who need insurance. And here's the deal we're going to make with you. We're going to give you 90% of the money that it would cost to serve this population. We're going to give you 90% of the money. Only thing you've got to do is come up with 10% of the money. So the state said, okay, we'll take a look at it. 31 states said it's a good idea. It's going to help poor folk in our state. It's going to help the doctors. It's going to help the hospitals. It's going to make people healthy. It's going to do so much for so many. 31 states said, great idea. But 19 states said, Washington ain't going to tell us what to do. You know, these poor people need to get a job and make some money and get their own health insurance. We are not going to expand our Medicaid program. And so we said to them, well, if you don't expand, there are penalties that we're going to impose on you. They took us to court, took us to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they won the case on that one little point. The U.S. Supreme Court decided, made a decision, that we cannot punish states, we cannot force states to expand their Medicaid program. We can make it voluntary, but we cannot make them do it. And so after the Supreme Court decision, 1 or 2 other states, even with Republican governors, went on and expanded their program because they knew how important that program was to their people. But North Carolina, our state, refused, and still refuses, to expand the Medicaid program under Pat McCrory. I don't miss him one bit. So, Governor Cook is trying all that he can administratively to expand the Medicaid program, but it's difficult because it takes the buy-in of the legislature in order to make it happen. Now, getting to the final point. The Republicans have been trying for the last 7 years to repeal the whole thing. Not just the Medicaid piece, but just take the whole thing and ball it up and throw it in the trash can and be done with it. They've tried over 50 times, and we voted over 50 times, and every time it would pass, President Obama would refuse to sign it, and it would be dead because it takes the president's signature. Well, you know who's in the White House now? And you know who now controls the House and who controls the Senate. So now they've got this brand new idea that they're going to repeal Obamacare, but replace Obamacare. And that's supposed to feel good, you know. But here's the detail. The detail is that they're going to do away with subsidies. That $400 that they give you every month to help you buy insurance, they said it's too expensive, we're going to do away with that. But this is the okie doke. They said, okay, but we got a replacement. We're going to give you a $2,000 tax credit on your income taxes at the end of the year. So when you got to file your income tax return and you got to pay $4,000 in federal taxes, your tax bill now is $2,000. So that $2,000 does not even come close in offsetting the amount that you were getting before. And they're doing away with the individual mandate so that you're not required to get insurance, and it's just terrible. And now they want to block grant the Medicaid program. It's okay, you want to expand the Medicaid program, here's the way we're going to do it. North Carolina, you've been getting $4 billion a year from Medicaid. We're going to give you that $4 billion, and we're out of it. You take your $4 billion and you build your program any way you want to do it. You talk to your county commissioners and y'all build your Medicaid program. Well, what happens if more people need Medicaid? Too bad. What happens if hospital bills and doctor bills go up? Too bad. What happens if the rescue, goes up from $300 per transport to $400 per transport? Too bad. So what's going to happen is that the states, under the block grant idea, will have to cut who gets Medicaid, and they're going to have to cut what benefits they get from the Medicaid program. Well, we'll pay for this, but we won't pay for that. Or we're going to stop paying doctors and hospitals what we have been paying over the years. The fact of the matter is they're going to pull the rug from beneath poor people and cause the whole healthcare delivery system to collapse. And so that's why it is important that we have the Democratic Party. We must be organized and unified, and we must be ready to fight this fight. We've been fighting it for years, and we cannot sit down now. We've got to fight this fight. 2018 is right around the corner, and the next thing you know, it will be 2020, and we will be electing another president at that time to be president. And so all political organizations start at the grassroots level. And this, Edgecombe County, is the grassroots level. This is what it's all about. I traveled the country for Hillary back during the presidential campaign. I forgot the number of states, communities that I went to, but there were quite a few. They were paying the bill. But I went all over the country, and I cannot tell you the dozens of groups just like this that I've spoken to in Iowa and Colorado and Michigan and other places. This is the way it works. Don't be disappointed that there are not 500 people sitting here this morning. This is common. This is a typical type gathering for the Democratic Party. This is where it is because this is where ideas are formulated, and this is the way we win elections. And so now we go back to Washington. We are home for 2 weeks. We go back to Washington, and we continue to fight this fight. What we're fighting right now, and I'm really getting in the weeds on you now, and so I won't get too deep on you, but I will tell you this. The federal budget runs out April 28th, and the federal workers in here, you know what I'm talking about. The federal budget runs out April 28th. We haven't gotten a new budget because the Republicans haven't been able to agree on a new budget. We are operating on a continuing resolution, which means we're just continuing to fund it from the previous year. It runs out on April 28th. And the Tea Party has already served notice that they ain't going to agree to any more extensions. Either they got to meet them on their turf and their demands, or we won't have a budget. We will see. The debt limit. Back in 2011, America hit the debt limit, and they put President Obama through it twice, trying to get permission to raise the debt limit. Finally, when they gave Obama permission to raise the debt limit, that means to borrow some more money, he had to cut the same amount in cuts. And those cuts are hurting us all across the country. They're hurting us here in Edgecombe County. And so watch for those battles because they're coming up. The budget runs out April 28th. The debt limit comes up this summer. And then we've got to get a budget for 2018. We haven't even started on Trump's budget for 2018. He sent it over the other day. And here's what his budget says, and I really will close with this. And this is what you've got to understand. And a lot of people, I assume that a lot of people know this and they don't. So I always like to make sure people understand it. When you do federal budgeting, when you increase spending, you've got to pay for it, which means you've got to decrease somewhere else. It's so simple. And I just assume people know that. You know, I live this stuff every day. But you've got to know it as a citizen, as a taxpayer. It's called pay-as-you-go. It's called budget neutrality. Those are the rules of budgeting in the House of Representatives, in the Congress. If we increase spending, we've got to decrease it somewhere else, or we got to raise taxes. And they ain't gonna raise taxes, so it's gonna be cutting spending. Trump has now come out with a $54 billion increase in spending for the military.
That's right.
And that sounds good on the surface, that we're taking care of the military. Well, it's going to come at the expense of cutting $54 billion somewhere else. And his cuts have already been announced. Low-income heating systems, okay, Meals on Wheels, eliminating the Minority Business Development Agency. He goes on and on and on with the programs that he wants to cut under this budget. He hasn't given us the details on building that $40 billion wall. And we've got to find out how he proposes to pay $40 billion to build a wall. Are they going to add to the debt, the deficit? No, because the Tea Party ain't going to let them do that. So it's going to have to be even more cuts than that. And then he's talking about a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Infrastructure is wonderful. That's building schools and highways and bridges and airports and tunnels and broadband and all that. I mean, that's good stuff. But $1 trillion, he's going to have to come up with a plan to pay for it. And I know what he's going to do. What he's going to do is say, okay, well, let my rich friends do the building. And we just cut their taxes. You would give them tax cuts and tax breaks in order to build out the infrastructure. He is in there to take care of himself, his family, and his friends, and the people around him. And we've got to be organized at the local level to get ready for the next election. I didn't come with a rah-rah political speech today because I just had these things on my heart. I just had to tell you what's going on in Washington to show you the importance of why you've got to be organized here in Edgecombe County, because the state depends on you, and the presidential candidates at the national level depend on North Carolina. So you see how we connect the dots, and you see why you're so important. Thank you so very much for having me. Yeah, you sound like a news reporter. I tell you very simple.
And not contacting Congress.
Yes, yeah, that's where I'm going. Night before last, I was sitting at a movie theater, a playhouse in D.C.